only did we finish FF5, not only did I face possibly one of the most well-designed end bosses of a video game ever, not just talking Final Fantasy, but we have a conclusion to do. Ladies and gentlemen, our journey of FF5 is complete as of today. I want to talk about it. I want to give my final thoughts on it before we move on to our next adventure, which in the FF franchise will be FF7 Rebirth. And obviously the conclusion to all of the FF single-player games, the mainstay main series games, as FF5 is our last one. What a journey it has been. Coming into this, we knew what we had to do. We needed to get the last tablet. And then it was probably time to face down X-Death himself and bring this home. How short a time I thought we had remaining in FF5. But FF5 is monstrous. It is so big. There's so much going on that this was an all-day affair. Especially as I didn't know Final Fantasy V contains super bosses. The first real appearance. There was kind of a super boss in 4, but it died. It was like a tank thing that just like fell over, and it was like, oh, okay. It was just a random encounter, I think. It was either on a bridge or it was in a dungeon or something. But now we have real super bosses in the names of Omega and Shinryu, who make their... I think this is the very first appearance of Omega. And my God, does he show up with... murder in his heart is how I would describe it. Murder in his heart. Let's talk about what was going on then. So, we're moving through. I was a little perturbed that I couldn't find the last tablet, even though it was where it was supposed to be. Kind of an interesting story is we found the dungeon, the underwater engulfed by fire. I cleared out this whole dungeon and found a dwarf camp inside. I was like, oh, this is odd, because this doesn't take place in any of the other 3 tablet endgame dungeons. And then I find a guy digging a tunnel. I didn't find a tablet. What I found was a guy digging a tunnel who said, I think we're below a forest and something weird is happening above us. So I was like, oh, maybe the tablet's not actually in here. We have to go to a certain place on the map that is concealed until this point. So I walked my ass all the way out of the dungeon. Now I want to point out here, screw you devs. There is a door in this dungeon that I saw clearly. And it's in a watery room, and it has water pouring over the front of it. We had just come from a dungeon, a water-based dungeon, where if there's water pouring with this exact animation, you can't go near it. The idea is you go above it, and your water brings you down into it. It's to prevent you walking into it. Bear that in mind. So I crawled my ass all the way out of the dungeon. I flew over to this forest and found the Impossible Village. A village that is when the worlds were rent asunder, they got caught in the void and time doesn't move for them. And they're very weird and unusual and strange and all sorts of bizarre things are happening. And they sell serious endgame stuff, which is great. They sold like Dispel, which was just a dream to get. So this is, I knew we were at the endgame now and there wasn't going to be like another halfway of the game going because we've capped out most things. I will point out the job system. Let me talk about that later. But this was wonderful. Lots of hidden passages, lots of strange things. Managed to cap my piano playing skill, which I did go back to the bard from the very beginning of the game and play my capped piano skill. I used like, you are the master of the piano. Gave me some spells. I'm not using a bard, so I'm not really going to utilize those spells. But still, was cool. Had another guy made me run around the world on a yellow chocobo to give me a reward, which was great. Gave me some really cool gear, like coral rings and things like that, that make me immune to certain damage types, which... was good because this was going to become very, very important very, very soon. But after like exploring this and not getting much more story going on other than this strange and wonderful village, I was like, well, where the hell do we go? What do we do? I will point out at this point, because we did have the break for my vacation, I had absolutely forgotten how to get to the last boss. And the game did remind me. It took me a moment to remember, but I was like, I want the last tablet. Where is it? I was like, it's got to be in this underground temple. And I was like, it can't be that door. The game taught us specifically that those doors cannot be accessed. So I ran my ass back, but I had nowhere else to go. So I ran my ass all the way back through and got in there. And sure enough, you can just walk in the door. You can just walk in the door. I was like, you son of a... God damn it. But got the final tablet and collected the remainder of the legendary weapons. So I had all the legendary weapons and then nothing. And I was expecting, like, one of the NPCs who's been sending us, like, the Chancellor has been sending us on this mission to get the tablets and things, to be like, okay, you have all the legendary weapons. Now it is time to face X-Death. Now is the moment to go for it. Doesn't do that. He just keeps saying the same dialogue. I'm like, crap. Well, where is Exdeath? So I spent the next few minutes looking around for Exdeath's castle, because I remember seeing that castle. And honestly, the whole stream was Pepe laughing at me, because somebody must have said how it was, and they've gone, oh yeah. But it did dawn on me. I was like, wait a minute. No. It's one of the holes, because they took Castle Tycoon. I remember the game saying to me, don't go here yet. You're not prepared. I was like, oh, okay, we'd have to do that, which worked. I went into the void. This FF5 is really hard. I talked about this in yesterday's video. And nothing encapsulates that difficulty more than the next probably 5 hours that I spent in this dungeon. Absolutely relentless. I was lucky that I had moments in the game where it was like, high potions are actually a really good thing to get, so I'd stacked up on them. Ethers, as expensive as they're 1,500 gil a time, which doesn't sound a lot, but when you're only rolling around 100k and you've got to buy new spells, which cost like 20 or 10k, spending like 40k on ethers is a lot of money. And I'd started stacking up on cottages just to save time, so I was lucky. Lucky is what I would say here, because this was 8 or 9 floors of the void that not only had one pit stop, I think, and then one before the very last boss, but also contained 2 super bosses and a showdown with Gilgamesh Greg himself, like the final showdown with him. And it also contained a boss gauntlet of 9 bosses. That's what's in there. I do want to say this, though. Narratively speaking, given the tools they had at the time to create these environments with pixel art, this is phenomenal. Like, to see the advanced version of FF14 when you go into dealing with Omega, how it advanced today, but this is the origins of this. It's so good. Traversing through memories, through castles of illusion, through being misled, going into time-stopped areas. So we ended up back in the Impossible Village where time is frozen, and moving between different environments. It was phenomenally well done. Like, just massive shout-outs to the team who created this, because you, even in this simple pixel art style, you fully got what was going on. This crazy, crazy world, which ultimately led to FF6 and beyond. Mwah, masterpiece. Absolute masterpiece. So I was working through here. I was getting pretty good with my jobs, but then I saw Omega. I went into a room and I saw Omega. Now, Omega is clearly skippable, is the first thing I noticed, because they taught you that certain enemies, like these crazy old men in a prison, you can avoid them. If they're on the world map and moving around like Pokemon, you can absolutely avoid them. But I'm not avoiding crap, right? So I challenged Omega, which wiped me in the first turn. And I was like, oh my god. Oh my god. This is what always happens, and hopefully will continue to happen in the future, is after about 40 minutes of puzzle solving with this boss, a lot of the people who know about FF5 and know what's going on were just flat out saying, why are you wasting your time here? You're not supposed to do this now. You're supposed to be much more powerful. You're supposed to be doing X and Y. This is not designed for you to fight now. It's more of a replayability, go and grind and come back and be able to challenge this boss kind of thing, right? It's an optional super boss that's in the game that is utterly relentless, and Omega is relentless. But I am a stubborn fool, and I saw a glimmer of light. Omega has permanent reflect, and so I was working around ideas, and I was like, I need to know, before we continue, how much HP does this thing have? Because for all I know, I might be able to zerg it down using some setup like double rapid fire monks with mimic in order to really put out huge damage, because my rapid fire with a certain setup gave me like 12k damage a round from one person. It was the most DPS output I possibly had at this point in the game. So I like self-reflected one person and reflected Libra back onto Omega, which means it can't be reflected twice, to find out Omega had 55,000 HP. That was the glimmer of light. I was like, I need 5 rounds. 4 if I'm lucky with crits, but 5 rounds brings us home. So I was like, okay. Okay. How do I make that happen? And I then jostled, switched, maximized, uptimed, learnt, mechanically learnt. Confused was the biggest problem, is it could confuse the whole party and encircle people, which means they're just removed from the fight. He had the capability of destroying me in turn 1, but there was a chance. So I ended up going, after a lot of trying, I figured out, is like, if I can keep Bartz alive as a rapid-fire Kaiser-knuckled monk, which gave us that 12k damage around. However, he has 0 protection against anything else, right? And he doesn't have haste either, which means he can die in between being rezzed. And then, in order to bypass the fact that somebody can be removed via encircle, and bypass the idea that 3 or 4 members of the party can be confused, and I can't remove that in any way with it besides Asuna, is I ended up with a triple white mage setup. So I essentially had 3 healers just to try and get Bartz alive long enough to do rapid fire. I then learned that he doesn't do the confuse until you actually melee him, which means I can just defend for a couple of rounds while he's blasting me in the face, just topping people off and getting ready for the fact that the next time we attack, he could crumble the whole team. This boss was maybe an hour and a half of puzzle solving. Not frustration, puzzle solving. Finding a new piece, putting it in to get the clearer picture of what was happening. And it could not have exemplified how amazing the Final Fantasy V job system is more than anything else I've done in the game. More than the Twin Towers with swapping, which was great, but this was so much better because it was a complex puzzle, but I was not restricted on my solutions, which is great. I could have gone, like I said, I had like a double monk mimic setup because that person didn't have rapid fire. I could have gone with like a major reflect setup where I'm banging spells off myself, because a couple of his spells could be reflected, but not all of them, which meant I moved to a more item focused thing. I used freelancers. I tried so many things here. I tried freelancers, I tried mimics, I tried swapping people to ranger, I swapped around jobs constantly to get this picture together, and then it paid off this in such a visceral, wonderful way when that boss finally fell down that I was like, this is phenomenal. This is such a well-done thing. I wouldn't have been able to do it as a kid. I'm not under any illusion, and I wouldn't have been as stubborn as this. I would have just gone, oh, I just need to go and grind. We have not grinded any levels at all in any of the Final Fantasy games, and I've done them all now, at least the main entries. And I take good credit in that, is when we started this journey over 12 months ago, a lot of people are like, this is the grindy game. Oh, you need to go and grind here. And we've never done that. We've certainly gained more XP than necessary sometimes by being naturally lost, which happens in some of the games. But never like, okay, we're grinding for the next hour, right? You're just going to grind up levels and things like that. Never, ever done that. And this was another example of beating that. And it was the crescendo of the game. Because obviously nothing was going to be harder than this, or so I thought, than beating Omega. But what a tremendous moment. Moving through this, a lot more mini-bosses. The big problem here was that after fighting Omega, I'm resource depleted. I have nothing left. I was down to like 2 elixirs or something, and my characters are just running out of steam. That's it. I'm running out of Phoenix Downs because I'm trying to save mana on reses. I'm trying to osmose with Black Mage to keep us going and to swap them to White Mage. I was doing all sorts of stuff, and the game would not let up. It just would not stop. And then it was like, oh, here's Gilgamesh, who's a friend now, because we show him the way out, and had a wonderful ending scene with Gilgamesh where he self-sacrificed himself, unnecessarily, because we could have killed the enemy regardless, but it was for storytelling reasons. I'm not a moron. Which was a great send-off, as Gilgamesh's will return, we will meet again. And yes, we certainly will, Greg. We certainly will. But I was... it was almost Dark Souls-like. If any of you have played through Dark Souls, certainly in a blind capacity, not knowing where that next bonfire is, and then seeing it and being like, I made it. Like, that feeling of, oh my god, it's over. Like, certainly I remember my first time in Blighttown, and like, do we push forward? Do we go back and refresh now we've got more knowledge and try again? Or do we go like an extra couple of minutes and maybe there's sanctuary waiting for us? I felt that. I felt that. The next super... And then, but before we got there, and as I was running out of everything, my healers had no mana, nothing. I had to fight Shinryu, the second super boss. 3 pulls, I think it was. Shinryu is not Omega, and also I'd had the learning experience that was Omega. So I was more prepared. I had ideas about what I wanted to do, and it worked very effectively. So Shinryu was a little disappointing in comparison to Omega, but it was only because Omega was so hard and so good that I had acquired all that knowledge, which I could transfer very quickly into Shinryu and dispose of Shinryu. The more the point was, is that after I came out of Shinryu, there was still no respite in sight. I'm like, oh my god, this is unbelievable. This dungeon is so mean and so nasty. And it was the final finale with Greg that gave us that respite. I don't have much to say on Xdeath other than the model is fantastic and its Final Fantasy XIV counterpart is also tremendously good. But compared to Omega and Shinryu, yeah, the boss was nothing. We just beat the crap out of him and he died, which is not surprising. It was I even compared it to the Pro ZD thing. It's like where you find the final fight, you will never stop me, and you just get slapped to the floor, and it's like I collected all the pine cones. It was a bit like that. I was so strong and so adept at putting out massive damage while not dying at that point that it was a sad day for Xdeath. The finale was nice, a little dragged out, a little Lord of the Rings on this one for me. We got wonderful cutscenes and resolutions with Galoof. Galoof obviously made his return in ghostly form, as did the rest of the Dawn Warriors. And we got this little, similar to FF6. FF6 version is better. I felt a little bit more connected to the other characters in 6 than I did in 5. But a little cutscene of everybody in Kryl a year later resolves to be on her own, and then the friends show up and it's all happy, smiley times as the crystals and the world is restored to normal. So a wonderful ending to the narrative. My conclusion briefly here before we do the main video on the main channel is that FF5 is maybe my favorite. I'm still decompressing all the games we've played because they have strongs and weakness, but in just overall strength, I don't know what the weakness of FF5 is. Other than its difficulty, probably. For a lot of people, but I enjoy difficulty, so for me that's a bonus. The narrative is relentless and good. The pacing is so good. You're lost for minutes at best, and it's usually because you've forgotten something, and you're like, oh yeah, that's where you need to go. The gameplay is good. Dungeons are interesting. There's intrigue. There's mystery. There's Pavlov's guns everywhere that pay off later in some big way. Like I said, the Bard thing takes the entire game to resolve to get these spells, but it tells you it like the beginning of the game. You've got to remember that's the thing. The job system is the best, I think, by far, of any of the FF games. Like 10 comes close, but 10 kind of cheeses it by allowing you to swap players in and out. This one just gives you freedom, and I love freedom. I fought for freedom in every game we've played for years. I love player choice and player freedom. Give me the tools to solve your problems, and I will have such a better time than I can't do it, I need to grind levels. Give me the tools to solve the problems, and I will sink in, and I will bury down and become pure degenerate to enjoy it. And FF5 did all that. The soundtrack is... It's incredible. The soundtrack is so good. We were bopping to the end of the game. We're playing this game for, I think it clocked in at 40 hours, and I'm still bopping away like, yeah, this tune's a jam. Like, there's definitely songs that are great and phenomenal in the other FF games, and then there are ones that are weaker. This game is just banger after banger after banger. I can't say enough good words about Final Fantasy V, honestly, and the fact that it's not mentioned often in the same breath as, you know, old nostalgic players' favorites like 7, and people talk about 9 and 10 because obviously there's far more modern gamers than when these games were coming out a long time ago. And I just can't recommend it enough. I love this game. I think it's fantastic. It was a joy, a pleasure. And getting to fight a boss of that difficulty and having the tools to solve it, it was just the absolute cherry on top of a wonderful, wonderful cake. Thank you for this journey. A new journey begins. It's going to be really fun. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.